So we're going to continue doing Boirer. We spoke yesterday about peeling, but we did not talk about the $1 million shayla, which is
Rapper.
a peeler. No, a peeler. What's the story with a peeler? So in order to understand this, we have to take a step back for a moment, and we have to maybe say, are all peels created equal? Yesterday we learned a little bit, and we said peeling is allowed, even though it's the orange peel you don't eat, but as long as you're doing it for immediate consumption, it's going to be allowed. If it's for non-immediate consumption, it's not going to be allowed. But now the question is, when it comes to an apple, you usually eat the peel. Or let's pretend the Metzias is that Roiv, majority eats apple peels. So is it the same rules or not? Now this is the point that's a very interesting point. This is a unclear point in the Mishnah Berurah. The Mishnah Berurah already comes along and says it's only mutter for miyad. The Shartzian quotes a Pri Megadim that says maybe klipois atapuchim, apple peels that roiv oilam oichlin kach b'loy doichek, maybe laniach, not for immediate purposes, it's mutter, and he leaves it open-ended. The Shart, so again, it's just an interesting build-up in the Mishnah Berurah. The Mishnah Berurah says you can only do it for miyad. Then in the Shartzian, he quotes a Pri Megadim, and the Pri Megadim says sarich ir. So what's the psak halacha? So what's very interesting is this boils down to a machlekes or Moshe Feinstein versus Rosh Zalman Arbach. That's obviously there's many more names and faces in this machlekes, but that is the way that we're going to. Those are the two names we're going to use. Then Ramosha comes along and Ramosha says psak is like the Magen Avram. The Mishnah Berurah quoted the Magen Avram. L'chumra, you only could do it for immediate usage, even a peel that most people eat. The Sharatzian quoted the Shaila of the Pri Megadim. It was a Shaila, and it's only mutter for immediate consumption. That is the psak of Rabbeinu Hagadol or Moshe Feinstein. Comes in Rosh Zalman in the Shmir Shabbos, Parakimel Ha'aret Tzadi, makes a bit of a shtickle Torah over here, and he wants to say that there's no machlekes. It's interesting, it's a sugya that we don't have time to discuss it, but the words that we'll read are Beklipa Sheroiv B'nei Adam Oichlim, even the Magen Avram is Maida he holds, and it's mutter for even not immediate usage. So Shlomo Zalman is going to tell you, if you want to peel an apple, I think an apple is something that we'll all agree the majority of the world eats the peel. I think that's probably the one item we could agree upon when it comes to cucumbers. We're maybe going to disagree, maybe we will, maybe we won't. Don't forget, when you have those fancy salads and they have sliced cucumbers and part of the peel is on and part of it is off because it looks pretty, that means you eat the cucumber peel. Even though you tell me, no, I peel all my cucumbers, I only eat them peeled, I'm a very fine, fancy person. But in the fancy people platters, they have them with the peels, so probably Roiv eats cucumber peels as well. Probably it's not a machlekes that some people say in Eretz Yisrael, everyone eats the peels and here they don't. I think everyone eats the peels always, it's just a matter of preference. But either way, so it boils down to machlekes or Moshe Feinstein versus Shlomo Zalman on a peel that the majority of people eat. Are you allowed to peel it for non-immediate usage? Again, let's go in order. To peel for immediate usage, I'm not talking about a peeler yet. I'm talking about peeling. We're going to get to peeler in a moment. To peel something using a knife right now. To peel for immediate usage, everyone agrees it's allowed. To peel for immediate usage, whether it's an edible or inedible peel, everyone agrees it's allowed. A banana peel, an orange peel, an apple peel. We're discussing to peel for non-immediate usage. Says Rav Moshe Feinstein, it's not allowed even if the majority eats the peel. Says Rosh Zalman, it is yes allowed if the majority eats the peels. That is, we'll call it introductory remarks to a peeler. Now, the big question is, what is the status of a peeler? So really, this as well could be boiled down to machlekes. This as well could be boiled down to maybe a machlekes or Shlomo Zalman versus Ramosha. Ramosha, there's no tshuva from Ramosha. They quote B'Shem Ramosha in the English book. In the it's called the Shabbos Kitchen. They quote that Rav Reuven Feinstein said B'Shem his father mutter lishtamish bin maklef. A maklef is a peeler. You're allowed to use a peeler. That is what they say over B'Shem Ramosha. Whether the Shmir Shabbos agrees or disagrees, let's leave that out for a moment. So Ramosha, who was the one that said you're only allowed to peel for immediate usage, but he's allowing us to use a peeler. That's what Ramosha says. Well, what's bothering you? What do the two have to do with each other? Right. We'll get there in a minute. Don't worry. Yeah.
I mean, even if it's mutter elsewhere to use a peeler over here, might be different.
We're talking about here. We're talking about using a peeler for boyer. That's our question.
What about, let's say, for a carrot or
That's what we're talking about. Carrots and
always. Stop. I'm saying in general. Okay.
Talking about using a peeler to take off the peel.
Nothing to do with edible or not.
Well, we're going to get to why I made this difference in edible and inedible. You'll see in one moment. Okay, so it says Ramosha, you're allowed. It says many other places you're not allowed. The Igleital, who's probably the original person who discussed the peeler, says you're allowed to use a peeler. Believe it or not, he allows you to use a peeler, but he says maybe it's only on peels that are edible. So now is where you understand why we care about this machlekes, whether it's edible peels or not. If it's an inedible peel, like let's call it a carrot peel, let's just pretend that's called an edible peel. I know some people eat them if they can. Let's pretend the carrot peel is an edible peel. To use a peeler on a carrot peel, we'll call it you're playing with fire. Why? Because is a peeler a clean yuchal bayrer? We said is a big shiloh. Ramosha says no. Maybe the Glital says no. Rosh Hashanah, many other places say yes. And therefore it's a shayla but deraisa. We said each of the Tanoim and Bayer is a deraisa. To use a peeler on an inedible peel, that's playing with fire. If one wanted to say Ramosha is quoted as saying it's mutter, I hear. But it would seemingly be playing with fire, and therefore to use a peeler on an inedible item would be not so simple. But to use a peeler on an edible item, which number one, we already learned that Ramosha and the Pri Megadim and maybe the Magen Avram, as Rosh Hashanah, actually not Ramosha, the Pri Megadim and maybe the Magen Avram, as Rosh Hashanah says that it's not called Bayer at all. Because again, if Rosh Hashanah is allowing you to peel your apple for non-immediate usage, what does that mean? It's not Bayer. Because one of the time a Bayer is immediate usage. That means he's saying if it's an edible peel, it's not bayr. You're cutting your steak in half. What are you doing? You have to be throwing something out that you personally don't want. Should be a first cousin to be spoke about just taking off the chicken skin. You're not doing anything. It's minachon, it's all one entity. You can take it off as much as you want. So now you want to know, can you use a peeler on that? Now that's an extreme chumrah. Maybe a peeler is a clean yuchad, but that might not even be bayr. So if you put the two together, l'chayra, the most shvil hazav, the middle of the road when it comes to peelers would be to use a peeler on something that's inedible, not so simple. But to use a peeler on something that we don't even know if it's included in the world of bayrer, that al pi pashtus would be mutter. And if someone were to ask, but the Mishnah Berurah seemingly holds that these peels are an issue of bayrer, but Ramosha said the peeler's okay. Now let's just explain why would the peeler be okay, because at the first thought it's crazy. Peeler is taking off the peel, that is bayrer. So we already explained the svara, just like we have some people that are very proficient in cutting fat off of meat, and if you have a sharp knife, then you could take we won't say it in public, then you could take the fat off the meat. So if you take your peeler, if you just take the peel and go like this, the peel doesn't fall off. The peel still will be attached to your apple. So is the peeler doing the bayrer? No. The peeler is just cutting off the peel. The bayrer is when you flick it off. The bayrer is done by gravity. That's the simplest way of explaining your emotion. And therefore, to use your peeler on something like an apple, something like a cucumber, l'chayr, that would be beseder. To use your peeler on something like a carrot, that would be something that should not be done. And to use your peeler on something like a potato should not be done because potatoes are muksa and because no one eats raw potatoes. But to use a peeler also to make chocolate shavings, for sure is mutter. And even those are going to tell you, but a peeler should be muksa, because you want to be machmir that a peeler is called bayr. If a peeler is called bayr, now it's muksa, it's a klishim lachtal isser, it does isser. Great, but to make chocolate shavings is a davar heter. And therefore to use a muksa item for a heter purpose, if it does the purpose the best, is going to be mutter anyway. So according to everyone, you should be able to use your peeler to make chocolate shavings. According to many, we'll say the shvil hazav is you can use it for your cucumbers and your apples. To use it for maybe those thick cucumbers and maybe for the carrots that people don't eat the peel, that we'll say this yesh makom lahachmir.
What's a kli miyuchad involved here?
Because that's one of the